Before the first piston moved, before smoke met sky, the earth was silent. Only the wind carried stories, stories of people who dreamed of movement faster than muscle, stronger than storm. In those days, the world was a patchwork of villages and footpaths. Distance was tyranny, and time its cruel enforcer. But in every age, there are a few who listen differently. Men who hear rhythm in the clatter of wheels, music in the groan of iron, possibility in the hiss of water on fire. This is their story, the story of how humanity tamed distance, turning the breath of steam into the pulse of progress, how iron grew wings and the world began to move. Long before engines and smoke, there were wheels and willpower. Merchants rolled wagons over rutted mud roads, horses strained against wooden carts, and oxen plodded through centuries of trade. The world was heavy, slow, and bound by geography. In the mines of Europe, where darkness reigned and men carried flame in their hands, someone placed the first timber planks on the ground, a simple idea born of necessity. Wooden rails reduced friction, guiding ore carts from the depths of the earth. Miners discovered what the rest of the world had yet to see, that wheels, when guided, could multiply strength 1,000-fold. From those groaning tunnels came the whisper of a revolution, a rhythm that would one day echo across continents. By the late 1700s, Europe was restless. Coal smoke hung over new factories, foundries roared with molten ambition. The age of handcraft was ending, replaced by the forge and the flywheel. Inventors tinkered with everything that could move: steam engines pumping water from mines, rotary machines spinning thread, even experimental carriages pulled by steam pistons. Yet, most of these inventions were loud, clumsy beasts, more spectacle than solution. Still, among them walked men of vision. One was Richard Trevithick, a Cornish engineer with soot in his lungs and brilliance in his eyes. He believed steam could do more than stand still. Trevithick's workshop smelled of oil and danger. In 1801, he built what many consider the first self-propelled road vehicle powered by steam, a clattering carriage that hissed and wheezed its way through the narrow streets of Camborne. The townsfolk watched, terrified and thrilled, as this mechanical beast lurched past, a machine defying the world's stillness. But Trevithick was not content with roads. Roads broke, wheels sank. He needed something stronger: rails. In 1804, in the coal fields of Wales, he built his locomotive for the Penydarren Iron Works. It was a crude thing, a horizontal cylinder, iron wheels, a boiler like a beast's heart. When it moved, the ground trembled. The machine hauled 10 tons of iron and 70 men, not swiftly, not smoothly, but undeniably forward. For the first time, a self-moving machine carried load along iron rails. The world changed in that instant, even if the world didn't yet know it. Trevithick's triumph was brief. His engines were powerful but heavy. The brittle iron rails cracked beneath their weight. Investors turned away. His name faded from headlines, and fortune never followed genius. He died poor, buried in an unmarked grave in 1833, but history would remember him as the spark that lit the fuse, the man who proved that fire and iron could pull the world itself. From his ashes rose others, carrying forward his dream, a line of visionaries who would perfect what he began. In the coal mines of England, another man studied the motion of wheels on track, George Stephenson. Born in 1781 to a poor collier's family, he taught himself to read by the light of a mining lamp after long shifts underground. He was no theorist, he was a doer, a man who listened to the language of machines until they spoke to him. By 1814, Stephenson built his first steam locomotive, the Blucher. It hauled 8 loaded wagons of coal at 4 miles per hour. Not fast by modern standards, but it moved like something alive, snorting and breathing through its pistons. From that moment, he devoted his life to perfection. In 1829, a competition was announced, the Rainhill Trials, to decide which locomotive would serve the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. 5 machines lined up under a sky of coal dust and expectation. Each was an experiment in motion, a different answer to the same question: how should power travel on rails? Stephenson's entry, the Rocket, gleamed like a promise. Yellow paint, polished brass, a tall smokestack breathing white plumes. Its design was revolutionary, a multi-tubular boiler that multiplied steam production, allowing more power from less fuel. When the flag dropped, the Rocket leapt forward like no engine before it. Crowds cheered as it reached unheard-of speeds, 30 miles per hour. Passengers wept, some fell to their knees, convinced they had witnessed sorcery. But it was not magic. It was engineering, precision, and passion, forged by a man who refused to believe the future had limits. The success of Stephenson's rocket was the gunshot that started a race no nation wanted to lose. Rails spread like veins across Europe and America. The sound of steam became the heartbeat of modern civilization. Trains brought coal to furnaces, wheat to markets, letters to lovers half a country away. Children grew up to the sound of the whistle. Farmers watched their fields shake as the future roared past their doorsteps. But with progress came danger. Engines exploded, bridges failed, workers died to keep the iron road alive. It was a time of greatness and grit, of sweat and sacrifice. This was the dawn of the machine age. If Stephenson was the engineer of motion, then Isambard Kingdom Brunel was the architect of ambition. He saw railways not as lines on a map, but as arteries of a living nation. In 1833, he became chief engineer of the Great Western Railway, a project so grand it was mocked as impossible. Brunel designed bridges, tunnels, and viaducts with an artist's eye and an engineer's mind. His broad-gauge track was wider and smoother, allowing greater speed and stability. His stations rose like cathedrals of steel and glass, monuments to movement. Where others saw a railway, Brunel saw a civilization rebuilt in motion. By mid-century, rail networks spanned continents. The Trans-Siberian linked Europe to Asia, a steel thread across frozen wilderness. The American transcontinental connected oceans, uniting a young nation in iron and change. In India, rails cut through mountains and monsoon plains, weaving colonial ambition and local labor into a complex tapestry of empire and change.
By the 1830s, steam had conquered doubt. Every whistle that pierced the morning sky was a declaration of victory. Man over distance, industry over isolation. Villages became towns, towns became cities, and cities became connected arteries of production and progress. The first railways were raw things, rails of brittle iron laid hastily upon uneven ground, engines roaring like beasts barely tamed. Yet there was something divine in their imperfection. People gathered on hills to watch them pass. Children waved at clouds of steam, and farmers paused mid-plow to marvel at this new god of motion. The land was changing, and so were the hearts of those who lived upon it. As the iron roads spread, so too did fortunes. The 1840s were called the Railway Mania, a fever that gripped Britain and then the world. Investors poured money into railway shares. Men who once sold candles and cotton now speculated on iron and speed. Across Europe and America, surveyors carved lines across maps like veins on a living body. Landowners protested. Priests preached against machines that disturbed God's peace. Yet progress rolled forward on steel wheels. Behind every mile of track stood armies of workers, the navvies. They dug, hammered, and blasted through mountains, carving tunnels where no man had walked, building bridges that spanned rivers like iron rainbows. Their songs were the rhythm of the age. Imagine the sound of thousands of picks striking stone, the clang of hammers, the hiss of steam from temporary engines, the smell of sweat, smoke, and freshly turned earth. Railway building was not for the weak. Many died. Others vanished into history unnamed. But together, they built a new geography, one measured not in miles, but in minutes. And every strike of their hammer echoed one truth: progress demanded sacrifice. By mid-century, engineers pushed locomotives beyond Stephenson's original dreams, the 440 American type, the consolidation freight engines, the single-driver expresses of Britain. Each was a step closer to perfection. Boilers grew stronger, pistons faster, wheels larger. The thunder of engines became a sound of pride, the pulse of empire. Passenger cars evolved from bare wooden boxes into velvet-lined salons. Conductors wore brass buttons and authority. The railway was no longer a novelty. It was civilization on rails. But as trains grew stronger, so too did the need for control. In the chaos of the early days, accidents were frequent. A broken coupling, a missed signal, a misjudged grade. Tragedy followed progress. Yet from every disaster, engineers learned. Colored signal lamps replaced flags. Telegraph lines ran beside the rails, carrying messages faster than trains themselves. Time, which once was local to every village, was standardized. Railway time, they called it, so that schedules could synchronize across a nation. The train had not only conquered space, it had also disciplined time. Beyond Britain, the world was catching fire with rail. In America, railroads stretched across the wild frontier. The Union Pacific and Central Pacific met at Promontory Summit in 1869, their golden spike driven into the earth as telegraph wires carried the news around the world. In Russia, the Trans-Siberian Railway was born. 5,700 miles of frozen steel binding Moscow to Vladivostok. In India, rails wound through jungles and deserts, carrying tea, textiles, and people in carriages marked by class. Each line reshaped destiny. Nations shrank, empires expanded, and the whistle of steam became the anthem of modernity. The age of steam birthed legends. Robert Stephenson, George's son, perfected his father's work, designing the Planet, Patentee, and Britannia Bridge. Daniel Gooch engineered the Great Western's record-breaking locomotives. Matthew Murray, John Blenkinsop, and Timothy Hackworth all left fingerprints upon iron history. Their machines bore names of myth and majesty: North Star, Iron Duke, Flying Scotsman, symbols of the unstoppable march of human will. The train did more than move goods. It moved souls. People who had never traveled beyond their county rode to the seaside. Letters crossed nations in hours instead of weeks. Newspapers arrived the same morning they were printed. The world was becoming synchronized, connected by timetables, telegraphs, and trust in the machine. The rhythm of the railway was the rhythm of modern life, ordered, mechanical, yet strangely human. But progress, as always, came with shadows. Railway expansion devoured landscapes. Forests were cleared, hills leveled, rivers bridged. The old world that poets once called eternal now wore scars of stone and smoke. Communities split by new lines mourned their quiet fields. Farmers complained of frightened livestock. Towns protested at stations rising in their midst. The old world was dying beneath the weight of steel. Yet even those who cursed the trains secretly marveled when they passed, the roar, the shimmer, the unstoppable grace. Progress cannot be loved without being feared. By the late 19th century, railways ruled the world. The Flying Scotsman, the Orient Express, the Golden Arrow, these were not mere routes, but legends. Luxurious carriages, silver service, velvet seats. The rich traveled in comfort, while the poor still clung to open wagons. But all traveled together upon the same rails, a symbol of both equality and division. Railways became instruments of politics and power. Troops moved by train, borders shifted with each line built. Nations measured their progress by miles of track. The locomotive was not just a machine, it was a declaration of modern strength. As the century closed, the great steam pioneers had faded into history. Trevithick was long gone. Stephenson, too, laid to rest. Brunel died at 53, worn out by ambition. Yet their work endured. Their rails carried empires. Their vision shaped continents. And though they were gone, the echoes of their engines rolled across the earth, an endless hymn of motion. Steam had given humanity a new identity. We were no longer bound by where we were born, but how far we could go. At the turn of the 20th century, the iron horse had reached its peak. The machines were larger, faster, stronger, but the world was already dreaming of cleaner, quieter motion. Wires hummed with promise. Electricity whispered in laboratories. The next revolution was gathering charge.
By the early 20th century, the age of steam stood upon its own summit. The great express trains thundered through valleys, whistling like ancient gods proclaiming dominion over the earth. The Flying Scotsman, the Orient Express, the 20th Century Limited, names whispered with reverence. But within the thunder, a whisper grew louder, a whisper of electricity. Engineers knew that steam, for all its might, was dirty and inefficient. Boilers burst, soot blackened the skies, and mountains of coal devoured fortunes. It was time for a cleaner spark. The empire of steam would not end overnight. It would fade, hissing, smoking, sighing its last breath into a new age. The dawn of electricity began not in open plains, but beneath the ground. London's choking tunnels needed a miracle. Steam locomotives filled subways with smoke, suffocating passengers. In 1890, the City and South London Railway introduced something revolutionary: electric traction. For the first time, rails carried not just trains, but current. Motors hummed where once pistons pounded. The air was clean, the tunnels quiet, and humanity glimpsed what motion could be without fire. Soon, New York, Paris, and Berlin followed. Overhead wires stretched across skylines, glowing faintly at dusk. Cities pulsed with new energy, invisible, efficient, unstoppable. Names lesser known than Stephenson or Brunel now rose. Werner von Siemens, who built the first electric railway in 1879. Frank Sprague, who developed electric traction systems for streetcars and subways. Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison, whose rivalry over alternating and direct current would define how trains drew power for a century. These were not men of smoke, but of spark, minds who believed that energy should flow like thought itself, fast, silent, and invisible. In the first decades of the 20th century, engineers faced a question: how to deliver electricity safely and efficiently. Some favored overhead wires, the catenary, elegant but complex. Others chose the third rail, carrying power beside the track, where shoes beneath the train could draw current. Each system had its champions, and soon both coexisted. Europe favoring wires, America preferring rails. Beneath cities, tunnels glowed blue with electricity. Above them, streetcars sparked across intersections. The old rhythm of chuffing pistons gave way to a steady electric hum, the heartbeat of modern transit. Even as electricity claimed cities, the countryside remained beyond its reach. Long rural lines and remote frontiers needed something else, something powerful yet self-contained. In the 1920s, engineers turned again to the engine, but this time an engine that burned oil instead of coal. The diesel engine, perfected by Rudolf Diesel decades earlier, found its place on rails. Diesel locomotives were miracles of efficiency. No water stops, no firemen, no clouds of ash. They could run for hundreds of miles without rest. And when combined with electric transmission, the diesel-electric married brute force with precision. In America, the Electromotive Division, or EMD, unleashed streamlined titans like the E-Series passenger units, their silver noses gleaming under neon signs. Across Europe and Asia, similar machines followed, efficient, elegant, and eternal. Steam had roared. Diesel purred. The mid-century train was not just a machine. It was design incarnate. Streamlined bodies, curved like aircraft fuselages, sliced through air. Painters and architects collaborated with engineers. Art Deco met industry. Railways became theater. Engines gliding through neon cities, station clocks ticking like metronomes of civilization. Posters promised speed, comfort, modernity, as railways competed with airplanes for the future.
Passengers no longer rode simply to arrive. They rode to be part of the spectacle. Then came war, and rails once again became lifelines of survival. Locomotives hauled tanks, soldiers, food, and hope. In Europe, sabotage and strategy centered on rails. In Asia, trains became targets, their destruction crippling armies. Yet, even amid destruction, innovation thrived. Diesel engines proved more reliable under stress. Electric systems expanded in nations desperate for efficiency. The war turned trains into weapons, and then, when peace returned, into symbols of recovery. After the guns fell silent, rails carried refugees home, supplies to rebuild, and the weary hearts of nations learning to move again. By the 1950s, the world looked upon the train with new eyes. The soot was gone, the hum was gentle, and people once again fell in love with travel. Diesel streamliners like the Super Chief in America or the Blue Train in Europe defined mid-century glamour. Dining cars served silverware and candlelight. Conductors became ambassadors of elegance. But the skies were calling. Airplanes, once fragile curiosities, were stealing the passengers of the future. The railways had to evolve again. In Japan and Europe, visionaries refused to surrender speed to the sky. Electric engineers revisited old dreams with new science. Lighter materials, powerful motors, aerodynamic testing. In 1964, as the world gathered for the Tokyo Olympics, Japan unveiled the Shinkansen, the new trunk line. White as ivory, shaped like a bullet, it broke every record. 130 miles per hour sustained, whisper quiet, impossibly smooth. Crowds gasped as it slipped past like the ghost of tomorrow. It was not just a train, it was a philosophy. Precision, punctuality, perfection. The world had entered the age of high-speed rail. In France, engineers at SNCF dreamed of their own revolution. They studied wind tunnels, refined pantographs, and sculpted the now iconic nose of the TGV, Train à Grande Vitesse. When it debuted in 1981, painted orange and proud, it raced between Paris and Lyon faster than any wheel-borne machine before it. Speed was no longer novelty, it was identity. Across Europe,
High-speed lines grew like vines. Germany's ICE, Italy's ETR, Spain's AVE, each blending culture, design, and national pride. Every innovation had its heroes. Rudolf Diesel, the mind who imagined an efficient engine long before its time and vanished mysteriously at sea. Werner von Siemens, whose electric experiments turned current into motion. Frank Sprague, the father of electric traction, who gave cities their subways. And Shima Hideo, who chief engineer of Japan's Shinkansen, who fused tradition with technology. Each one carried Trevithick's spark, the belief that motion is the soul of progress. By the late 20th century, the distinctions between diesel, electric, and steam were more than mechanical. They were philosophical. Steam had been heart, diesel had been muscle, but electricity was mind. Signals turning digital, control systems thought for themselves, computerized braking, automatic doors, and regenerative power. The railway became intelligent. And yet, the old spirit endured. In museums, children pressed their faces to the glass of mighty steam locomotives. In the countryside, heritage railways puffed nostalgia into the wind. The past was not dead, it was alive in memory, propelling us into the future. When the smoke of the Second World War cleared, nations looked upon rails that had carried both war and hope. Those rails, though scarred, still glittered with promise. The world was smaller now. Faster airplanes crossed oceans, highways carved through continents, but the railways refused extinction. They would reinvent themselves, not as relics of the past, but as lightning for the future. In Japan, a nation reborn from ashes dreamed of motion that symbolized recovery, a movement so smooth, so precise, that it would become a heartbeat for the nation itself. In the 1950s, Japanese engineer Shima Hideo and railway visionary Sogo Shinji conceived an idea so audacious that even their colleagues laughed. Why not build a new railway, not merely faster, but wholly reimagined? Dedicated tracks, wider gauge, lighter trains, continuous electric traction. No soot, no jolts, no delays. They called it the Shinkansen, new main line. Construction began against all odds. Critics called it folly, too expensive, too dangerous, too radical. But when the 1964 Tokyo Olympics opened, the Zero Series Shinkansen streaked across the countryside like an arrow of white fire. At 210 kilometers per hour, it was nearly twice the speed of any existing train. Yet it rode as silently as silk, gliding across bridges and tunnels with mechanical grace. Passengers gasped, engineers wept. A symbol had been born, not of industry, but of rebirth. Every Shinkansen was more than machinery. It was discipline made visible. Japanese engineers obsessed over punctuality. A train could arrive within seconds of schedule, and if late by more than 1 minute, apologies were broadcast to every passenger. Maintenance crews worked like orchestras, synchronized teams checking wheels, pantographs, and signals in rehearsed choreography. Control centers glowed with analog dials and blinking lamps, tracking each train like a heartbeat on a national pulse monitor. Speed was not chaos, it was order refined to perfection. Western engineers arrived in Tokyo to see the miracle. French, German, and American delegations studied the Shinkansen's every bolt and bearing. It wasn't just fast, it was safe, quiet, and profitable. They returned home inspired, even envious. In France, where artistic passion met engineering rigor, a new vision began to form, a rival for the bullet train. In 1976, French engineers at SNCF began building a new high-speed prototype, sleek, aerodynamic, and radiant orange like the sun of Provence.
It would run not on exotic maglev or vacuum tubes, but on proven steel wheels, electrified and refined beyond imagination. The TGV Sud-Est debuted in 1981, and when it sliced through Burgundy at 260 kilometers per hour, it changed Europe forever. Passengers sat in silence as countryside blurred into streaks of gold and green. The cabin was serene. No vibration, no roar. The TGV became more than transport. It was style, identity, and pride. It told the world that France, too, could fly. Not in the sky, but along the earth. Meanwhile, across the Rhine, Germany refined precision into philosophy. The Intercity Express, ICE, was born, a white serpent of efficiency, gliding at 300 kilometers per hour. Inside, passengers found quiet cabins, sealed windows, and digital information screens, the first hint of the computer age merging with the railway. German engineering sought not flash, but perfection. Steel meeting silence in mathematical harmony. From Europe to Asia, high-speed networks multiplied. Spain's AVE connected Madrid to Seville across sun-scorched plains. Italy's ETR trains sang along the coasts like operatic arias. China watched, learned, and began to build its own network. Not one line, but hundreds. By the dawn of the 21st century, railways once mocked as old-fashioned were now the fastest, safest mass transport system on Earth. Yet some minds still looked beyond wheels. They dreamed of motion without contact, without friction, trains that floated on invisible cushions of magnetism. The concept of magnetic levitation, or maglev, had simmered since the early 1900s. German inventor Hermann Kemper had patented the idea, but it was not until decades later that technology caught up. In Japan, engineers built superconducting magnets that could lift entire trains off the track. In Germany, the Transrapid program tested sleek white prototypes floating above concrete guideways. When the Shanghai Maglev opened in 2004, passengers stared at displays reading 431 kilometers per hour. No wheels, no noise, just the whisper of acceleration, like gravity itself being outpaced. For a moment, the future seemed to have arrived. Even as maglevs defied friction, another dream took shape, a dream of motion through near vacuum tubes. In 2013, entrepreneur Elon Musk popularized the term Hyperloop, describing pods propelled by magnetic force through low-pressure tunnels. The idea was not new. Victorian engineers had imagined pneumatic tubes carrying passengers, but 21st-century materials and computing made it imaginable again. Prototypes emerged across the globe. Test tracks in Nevada, France, South Korea, and India. Engineers chased the horizon of supersonic ground travel. Yet questions lingered. Could such perfection ever be practical? Could it be safe, affordable, humane? Still, the idea burned bright, because humanity has never been satisfied with fast enough. The high-speed revolution was written by many hands. Shima Hideo, Japan, the father of the Shinkansen, who combined discipline and poetry in motion. André Chapelon, France, a visionary steam engineer whose aerodynamic theories laid the groundwork for modern streamlining. Jacques Tupper, France, designer of the first TGV, who sculpted speed into elegance. Dr. Ing Rudolf Boter, Germany, one of the ICE's lead engineers who married safety and automation. Dr. Y. Kasai, Japan, pioneer of superconducting maglevs who redefined what rails could mean. These were not merely engineers, they were dreamers with slide rules, artists with voltmeters, each one chasing the ghost of the future. Stand beside a Shinkansen track and you feel it before you hear it. a pressure wave rolling through the air, a hush of anticipation. Then, in a blink, it passes. White lightning, silent power. To witness it is to glimpse time itself moving faster than thought. Cameras blur, hearts skip, and for a moment the human story seems caught between past and promise. Every train that rushes by carries more than passengers. It carries the centuries of sweat, invention, and faith that made such motion possible. But as the world chased faster and faster, some began to ask, at what cost? Speed reshapes landscapes, economies, and even perception. Cities once days apart became neighbors. Air travel shivered under competition. Yet with speed comes isolation. Faces blur at stations. The journey becomes invisible. The very thing that once united humanity, travel, now risked becoming too fast to feel. And so designers sought balance, speed with soul, efficiency with empathy. Trains became symbols not only of progress, but of reconnection, proof that technology can bring us closer if used wisely. As the 21st century accelerates, nations race to electrify, automate, and decarbonize. China's vast network exceeds 40,000 kilometers of high-speed track. Japan continues to test superconducting maglevs, aiming for 600 kilometers per hour. Europe pushes hybrid trains powered by hydrogen fuel cells. India, Indonesia, and Africa begin building their own fast corridors, echoing the same ambition that once drove Trevithick and Stephenson. The story of trains is not over. It is simply moving faster.
In every museum, under glass and soft light, rest the giants of another age. Iron locomotives that once ruled the earth. Their brass fittings gleam, their pistons frozen mid-stroke, their wheels no longer turning but echoing eternity. Children press hands against glass. Old men stare with quiet awe. The smell of oil, dust, and time lingers like incense. These were not just machines. They were dreams forged in metal. They breathed, roared, and carried civilization upon their backs. And though the fires in their hearts have gone cold, their legacy burns in every line of rail that still hums across the world. Today, if you stand at any major station, Tokyo, Paris, Shanghai, Berlin, you feel it, a pulse beneath the platform, faint but alive. The ground vibrates not with chaos, but with order. The cadence of current, the rhythm of synchronized arrivals and departures. Modern trains glide like thoughts made physical. They whisper instead of roar, accelerate like sighs, and stop with precision that feels unreal. Computer systems monitor every meter of track. Satellites trace movement, and AI predicts maintenance before failure even occurs. The railway has become intelligent, a nervous system of steel and data stretching across continents. But progress carries responsibility. The same iron arteries that once pumped life into the industrial age now face the task of saving it. As the world confronts the cost of carbon, railways have emerged as champions of sustainability. Electric trains, powered by renewable energy, emit a fraction of the pollution of planes or cars. Hydrogen fuel cells hum in prototype locomotives, water vapor trailing instead of smoke. Regenerative braking recycles motion into power. Even the sleepers beneath the rails are changing, made from recycled composites instead of timber. Once, the train was the symbol of consumption. Now, it may become the symbol of redemption. The modern age has its own inventors, heirs to Trevithick, Stephenson, and Brunel. In laboratories and design studios, they sculpt the future from code and composite. Elon Musk, whose Hyperloop sparked renewed imagination for tube travel.
Dr. Kasai and the JR Central team perfecting superconducting maglev systems to reach 600 kilometers per hour. Alstom and Siemens engineers creating hydrogen hybrid trains that glide silently through mountains. Young innovators in Africa and India designing affordable regional rail for billions of emerging travelers. They share one obsession: to make movement limitless yet sustainable, speed without sacrifice. If you could see Earth from orbit at night, you'd see more than city lights. You'd see motion, glowing trails of energy crisscrossing continents. Each beam marks a journey: a commuter heading home, a student returning to family, a conductor watching horizon lines blur. The planet itself has become a web of rails, electric and digital. High-speed corridors link megacities, freight lines stretch through deserts, and autonomous cargo trains crawl across Australia's red heart, guided only by satellites. Every journey now carries more than passengers. It carries the memory of every hand that ever laid a track. It may sound like fantasy, but even beyond our planet, the idea of rails persists. NASA engineers study maglev launch tracks to hurl spacecraft into orbit using linear motors. On Mars, future colonies may one day deploy automated cargo rails across dusty plains. Proof that even on alien worlds, humanity cannot resist the comfort of connection. The dream that began in a Welsh coal pit might one day echo beneath a red sky. But speed and steel are not the heart of this story. People are. For every engine built, 100 hearts believed in it. For every mile of track, thousands of hands bled to lay it. The boy who once stood beside a line to watch the rocket fly past. The woman who waved her husband off to war on a troop train. The engineer who stayed up nights perfecting a valve. The child who rides the Shinkansen for the first time, eyes wide with wonder. These are the true locomotives of history. Technology may carry us forward, but emotion gives us direction. Across the world, heritage lines keep history alive. In the English countryside, restored steam engines puff through green hills. In India, the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway winds through clouds. In Colorado, the Durango and Silverton clings to cliffs with the same courage as its builders. Each whistle that echoes in the valley is a heartbeat from another century, reminding us that progress should never erase its past, only build upon it. If you listen closely inside any modern locomotive, beneath the computers and hydraulics, you can still hear something ancient, the rhythm of human breath translated into motion. Because every invention, every leap forward begins not in metal but in mind. From Trevithick's first puffing cylinder to the superconducting coils of maglevs, each step was driven by imagination, that strange, fragile fuel that never runs out. The true engine of progress has always been the human heart. In a future not far from now, trains may no longer touch the ground. They may glide through evacuated tubes or hover on fields of plasma. Perhaps they will hum through space stations or weave under oceans. But one thing will remain: the human desire to go, to see, to connect. We are a species that cannot stand still. Movement is our prayer, our proof of life. From the first wheel carved in stone to the superconducting magnet cooled by liquid helium, our story has been one long journey, from friction to flight. And if you listen closely, you can still hear it, the heartbeat of the rails. Night falls across a world of light and motion. In every time zone, a train departs. One in Tokyo, one in Paris, one in Nairobi, one in Chicago. Each is different. Some glide on magnets, others rumble on steel, yet all share the same pulse.
They carry people who dream, who work, who love. They carry the spirit of the first man who dared to trap fire in an engine. The rails, whether iron or invisible, are veins of civilization. And as long as they hum, humanity will never stop moving forward.